Amara Johnson walked through the wide glass doors of Terminal B, her red dress catching the light as if it were glowing in the early morning sun. The airport was alive with sound, announcements echoing from the speakers, children pulling their parents toward candy stands, business travelers rushing with rolling suitcases. But Amara's pace was calm, measured, and steady. She was not a woman in a hurry. She was a woman with purpose. Her mind was sharp, focused on the deal ahead. In less than 12 hours, she was supposed to stand in front of an international board of directors in Zurich and sign the largest funding agreement of her career, an investment worth $5 billion. For most people, that number was unimaginable. But for Amara, it was the result of years of hard work, sacrifice, and refusing to be underestimated. She had come a long way from the girl who grew up in a small neighborhood where people laughed when she said she wanted to be a CEO. Back then, people said she didn't look like someone who could sit at the head of a boardroom table. But she had proved them wrong, step by step, deal by deal, until her company became one of the fastest-growing global firms in technology and finance. Now, she was boarding her flight in first class, not because she wanted luxury, but because time was her most valuable asset. On the plane, she planned to review documents, make a few critical calls, and arrive rested, prepared to make history. But as she approached Gate B7, everything began to shift. The gate agent looked at her boarding pass, scanned it, and then frowned. Amara had been through hundreds of airports, and she knew the difference between a casual glance and a suspicious stare. The woman behind the counter cleared her throat, glanced toward two uniformed security officers standing nearby, and then looked back at Amara. "Ma'am," the gate agent said, her voice tight. "Can you step aside for a moment?" Amara raised an eyebrow. "Is there a problem?" "Just routine," the woman replied quickly, though her eyes darted nervously toward the officers who were already walking over. Routine. Amara had heard that word too many times in her life. She had learned it was rarely routine when it came to her. One of the security officers, tall and broad-shouldered, stopped in front of her. His partner stood just behind, hands clasped in front like a silent shadow. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," the tall officer said. His tone was polite, but there was a firmness underneath it that made it clear it wasn't a request. Amara stayed still. "Why?" "Just a quick security matter. Nothing to worry about." Nothing to worry about. Yet the officer's hand hovered just near her elbow, as if ready to guide her away by force if she refused. Amara could feel the eyes on her now. The businessmen in suits, the young couple holding hands, the family with 3 kids balancing juice boxes, all of them were staring. She knew exactly what it looked like. A woman in a bright red dress being pulled aside by airport security. And she knew exactly what the whispers were saying before they even started. She felt her stomach tighten, not because she was guilty of anything, she had done nothing wrong, but because she had been here before. Different cities, different airports, different faces, but the same script. "Is there something wrong with my ticket?" Amara asked firmly. The officer didn't answer her directly. Instead, he said, "Please come with us, ma'am. We need to check a few things." For a moment, Amara thought about arguing. She thought about showing her credentials, about explaining who she was, about telling them she didn't have time for delays. But then she stopped herself. She knew from experience that arguing only gave them more reason to treat her like a problem, so instead she nodded slowly. "Fine," she said. "Lead the way." The officer's eyes flickered with surprise. Maybe he expected her to resist. Maybe he expected a scene. But Amara was too smart for that. She adjusted her handbag on her shoulder, lifted her chin, and followed them through the terminal. The whispers grew louder. A child asked his father, "What did she do?" And the father quickly shushed him. A businessman shook his head, muttering something under his breath. Amara kept walking, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She didn't let her face show anger, though inside her chest a fire was burning. She was not just being pulled aside. She was being humiliated. Right? There in front of everyone. The officers led her to a small security office near the gate. The room smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant, with a desk, a few chairs, and a monitor showing the terminal cameras. "Please have a seat," the tall officer said. Amara didn't sit. She looked him straight in the eye. "What exactly is this about?" He shifted uncomfortably. "We received a report. Someone said your behavior was suspicious." Amara almost laughed, but the sound caught in her throat. Suspicious. That word again. It didn't matter that she had walked calmly, presented her documents, and gone through all the normal procedures. Someone, maybe the gate agent, maybe a passenger, had looked at her and decided she didn't belong. "Suspicious?" Amara repeated slowly. "Walking to my gate with a boarding pass in my hand is suspicious." The officer didn't answer. His partner looked away. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then Amara took a deep breath, reminding herself of what was at stake. She couldn't let this derail her. Not now. She reached into her handbag and pulled out her passport and boarding pass. She placed them on the desk with calm precision. "Here, you can check everything, but I want to make it clear. I have a meeting overseas worth more than your airline's annual profits, and every minute you waste here is costing more than you can imagine." Her words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. The officers glanced at each other. They had probably expected anger, maybe even panic, but instead they were facing a woman who radiated authority and control. Still, they went through the motions. They scanned her documents, asked her meaningless questions, typed her name into their system. Meanwhile, Amara sat down at last, but not out of submission. She sat with the posture of a queen on her throne, her back straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her mind was already racing, not with fear, but with strategy. She knew she would miss her flight. She knew the deal in Zurich would now be in jeopardy. But she also knew something else. This moment was bigger than her trip, bigger than one meeting. This was about dignity, respect, justice, and she would make sure the world knew what happened today. Amara sat in that small security office, her documents still on the desk, while the officers busied themselves with pointless checks. She had nothing to hide. Her passport was valid, her ticket was first class, her name was on the manifest. But that wasn't the point. The point was that they wanted to remind her she didn't belong. Minutes stretched into half an hour. Her flight boarding time had passed, and she could almost hear the sound of the plane's doors closing in her imagination. She pictured the other passengers settling into plush, first-class seats, while she was treated like a criminal in a room that smelled of stale coffee. Finally, the taller officer returned. He set her passport down in front of her and spoke with a tone that tried to sound official, but it carried no apology. "You're clear to go." Amara raised her eyes to meet his. "Clear to go," she repeated. "I was always clear. The only thing unclear is why I was pulled aside in the first place." The officer shifted uncomfortably. His partner looked at the floor. No answer. Amara rose slowly, her movements deliberate, graceful even in the face of insult. She picked up her passport, slid it back into her handbag, and adjusted the strap on her shoulder. She did not yell. She did not curse. She did not give them the satisfaction of seeing her lose control, but inside a storm was raging. She opened the door and stepped back into the terminal. Passengers were still moving about, but a few recognized her from earlier. Whispers floated through the air. Was she arrested? Did they let her go? Maybe she was dangerous. Each word cut like glass. But Amara did not flinch. She walked past them with her head high, her heels clicking against the marble floor with the rhythm of defiance. When she reached the gate, the plane was already gone. The sign above the counter now read, "Closed." The gate agent, the same woman, who had called security earlier, avoided Amara's gaze. She pretended to shuffle papers, her face burning with guilt. But Amara stopped in front of the counter and waited. The woman finally looked up. I'm sorry, ma'am, the flight has departed." Amara leaned forward slightly. Her voice was calm, but each word carried the weight of iron. "Do you know what that flight meant?" The woman swallowed nervously. I don't, ma'am. It meant a meeting that could change the future of an entire industry. It meant jobs, it meant innovation, it meant billions of dollars. Amara's eyes narrowed. And because you chose to see me as a threat instead of a customer, all of that is now delayed. Do you understand? The woman's lips parted, but no words came out. Amara straightened again. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The truth was enough. As she turned and walked away, her phone buzzed in her hand. It was her assistant, frantic on the other end. Amara, they're waiting for you. In Zurich. The directors are asking where you are. What should I tell them? Amara stopped in the middle of the terminal, surrounded by strangers. For a moment, she felt the weight of everything pressing down. The humiliation, the whispers, the lost flight, the massive deal on the line. But then her expression hardened. She spoke with a voice that carried not panic, but power. Tell them this, she said. Tell them the truth. Tell them I was pulled off a plane by airline security for no reason at all. And tell them I will still get the deal done, because no one, and I mean no one, can stop me from what I built. Her assistant's voice cracked with relief. Yes, ma'am, I'll tell them. Amara ended the call and slipped the phone back into her handbag. She could feel people staring again, some curious, some sympathetic, some still suspicious. But none of it mattered. In that moment, she made a silent vow. They would regret underestimating her, and soon, the entire airline would find out who exactly they had tried to humiliate. Amara stood at the wide window of the terminal, watching another plane take off into the bright sky. The engines roared, shaking the glass ever so slightly, and in that thunder she felt the echo of a truth she had lived her entire life. Sometimes the world tried to ground you when you were meant to fly. She checked her watch. The Zurich meeting had already started without her. For most people, missing such a moment would have been the end. Investors would walk away, competitors would celebrate, and newspapers would call it a failure. But Amara wasn't most people. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a video call from the boardroom in Zurich. Her assistant's nervous face filled the screen. Then the camera turned to show the directors seated around the polished mahogany table. Dozens of eyes stared into the lens, waiting for her. Ms. Johnson, one of the directors said, his accent thick, his tone sharp. You are not here. This does not inspire confidence. Amara inhaled slowly. She could almost hear the old voices from her past, the teachers who doubted her, the colleagues who dismissed her, the investors who told her she was too ambitious. For years, she had been underestimated. For years, people believed she didn't belong in rooms like this. But she had turned doubt into fire before, and she would do it again. She held the phone steady, her face calm and poised even though she stood in the middle of a noisy airport terminal with strangers rushing all around her. You want to talk about confidence? Amara said. Her voice was even, measured, but it cut through the noise like a blade. I was pulled off a flight this morning by airline security. Not because of what I carried, not because of what I did, but because of how I look. That airline delayed me, humiliated me, and cost me this flight. The boardroom fell silent. No one interrupted. But here's the truth, she continued. If I can face that, if I can stand here right now and still tell you that I'm ready to close this deal, then you should understand something about me. I don't break under pressure. I don't fold because of inconvenience. And I don't allow other people's small vision to dictate the size of my future. Her assistant, standing in the corner of the boardroom, was holding back tears. I built my company from the ground up, Amara said, her voice rising with conviction. I've faced worse than this, and I'm still here. If you want a leader who knows how to survive storms, you're looking at her. If you want your investment protected, know this. I protect what's mine. Always. The directors exchanged glances. Some leaned forward, suddenly more interested than before. One man nodded slowly, as though he had just realized he was speaking, to someone who could not be moved. Very well, the chairman said finally. We will wait for you. The deal will not proceed without your signature. You have earned that much. Amara allowed the faintest smile to touch her lips. Thank you. I'll be there. And when I am, we will make history together. The call ended. The phone went dark. Amara lowered it slowly and let out a long breath she didn't even realize she was holding. Around her, the airport noise continued. Boarding. Calls, footsteps, rolling luggage, but she no longer heard it. In that single conversation, she had turned humiliation into strength. She had taken the moment meant to break her and used it to remind the world who she was. Her eyes narrowed with focus. The Zurich meeting would wait. But she had another meeting to arrange first. One with the board of the very airline that had tried to humiliate her. She was no longer just a passenger who missed her flight. She was a CEO with $5 billion in her hand, and she knew exactly where to put it and where not to. This was no longer just about her. This was about sending a message, and the airline was about to learn the cost of disrespect. 2 days later, Amara walked into a different boardroom. This one was not in Zurich, but at the headquarters of the airline that had dared to humiliate her. The building was tall, glass shining under the morning sun, meant to project power and confidence. But Amara didn't feel intimidated. She had faced real storms in life. This was just another room, another table, another chance to show the world who she was. Her assistant trailed behind her, carrying a slim leather folder. Inside it sat the final investment agreement, $5 billion in funding that could rescue the airline from its financial struggles. Without it, their future was shaky. With it, they would have stability for years. As she entered the boardroom, the executives rose. Some offered polite smiles, others stiff nods. They all knew who she was now. They had read the headlines. CEO pulled off plane for no reason. Global investor misses meeting after airline humiliation. The story had gone viral, sparking debates on news channels and social media worldwide. The airline's name was now tied to scandal. Amara sat at the head of the table without waiting for permission. Her posture was regal, calm, unshaken. Across from her, the airline's CEO, a man with silver hair and a carefully practiced smile, cleared his throat. Ms. Johnson, he began, we deeply regret the incident at the airport. It was an unfortunate misunderstanding. We hope you can see that it was not reflective of our values as a company. Amara folded her hands together, her eyes fixed on him. Not reflective, she repeated softly. Then explain something to me. When your staff pulled me off that plane, when they questioned me for hours without cause, when they let my flight depart without me, where were those values you speak of? The room went silent. Executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. She continued, her voice steady, but each word struck like a hammer. I wasn't just a passenger that day. I was the investor walking in with the only thing keeping your company from collapse. I was the one bringing you $5 billion in lifeline funding, and you treated me like a criminal in front of the entire world. The silver-haired CEO opened his mouth, but Amara raised her hand slightly, silencing him without a word. This is not about me missing a flight, she said firmly. This is about respect, dignity, and the way you view people who don't fit your narrow picture of who belongs in first class. One of the executives, a woman with sharp glasses and a notebook, leaned forward nervously. Ms. Johnson, if we could perhaps move past the incident, I assure you. Amara's gaze cut to her like a blade. Move past it? Do you think people around the world are moving past it? Do you think the young woman who saw me escorted off a plane while she held her boarding pass in hand will move past it? Do you think the boy who asked his father why I was treated that way will move past it? Her words hung heavy in the air. The executives sat frozen. They had spent weeks calculating numbers, negotiating terms, planning for the relief that $5 billion would bring. But now they realized the money was slipping out of their hands with every word Amara spoke. She leaned back in her chair, her expression calm but unyielding. I came here today not to finalize your rescue, but to tell you this. I am taking my $5 billion elsewhere. To a company that understands respect is worth more than profit. To a company that will never forget that its passengers are its lifeblood, not its enemies. Gasps echoed around the table. The silver-haired CEO's smile cracked, panic flashing across his face. "Ms. Johnson, please, this will ruin us." Amara's eyes were cold, resolute. "No. You ruined yourselves the moment you decided to treat me like less than human. Money doesn't fix arrogance, power doesn't excuse disrespect, and leadership means accountability. Something this airline clearly doesn't understand." She rose to her feet. Her assistant quickly gathered the folder, but Amara didn't look back. She didn't need to. The sound of her heels echoed through the hall as she left the building. Behind her, the airline's executives sat in silence, realizing the truth. They had just lost not only billions, but also their reputation. Outside, the sun was bright, the air crisp. Amara paused on the steps, lifting her face to the light. She felt no bitterness, no regret, only strength. Because in walking away, she had reminded the world of something greater than money, the power of self-respect. And somewhere inside her, she knew this was not just her victory. It was a message to every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. Stand tall, and the world will remember your worth. The news broke like thunder across the world. Black CEO walks away with $5 billion. Airline in crisis after humiliation. Scandal. Respect over profit. Amara Johnson makes boldest business move of the decade. Headlines spread across newspapers, online portals, and evening broadcasts. Every channel replayed the story of how one of the most powerful women in business had been pulled off a plane, humiliated, and then turned her anger into the ultimate strike. In New York, anchors debated whether the airline could survive the financial disaster. In London, investors shook their heads as stock prices plummeted. In Dubai, business leaders spoke her name with admiration. And in small towns everywhere, ordinary people whispered her story with pride. For some, it was about justice. For others, it was about power. But for those who had ever felt looked down upon, it was about hope. Amara didn't celebrate publicly. She didn't need to. Instead, she worked quietly behind closed doors, directing her $5 billion into a rival airline, one that promised fair treatment, inclusivity, and a new standard of dignity for every passenger. Within weeks, that airline's reputation soared while the old one crumbled under lawsuits, boycotts, and resignations. At airports across the world, travelers began switching loyalties. They wanted to fly with the company backed by Amara Johnson, the woman who had stood up not just for herself, but for everyone. Months later, Amara stood on a stage at a global business summit. Thousands filled the hall and millions more watched live. She wore a simple navy blue suit, her presence commanding but graceful. She began her speech not with numbers or charts, but with a story. "I was pulled off a plane," she said softly, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "Not because I lacked the right ticket, not because I posed a threat, but because someone looked at me and decided I didn't belong." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "In that moment, I had two choices: let humiliation break me or use it as fuel to remind the world who I am. I chose the second." The audience leaned forward, captivated. "Business is not just about profit," Amara continued. "It is about values, about how we treat people when no one is watching, about whether we honor dignity above convenience. $5 billion may seem like a fortune, but respect is priceless." Thunderous applause filled the hall. Some rose to their feet, clapping with tears in their eyes. Later, as Amara stepped off the stage, a young woman approached her. She looked no older than 20, her eyes wide with admiration. "Ms. Johnson," she said, her voice trembling, "I just want you to know, I've always dreamed of starting my own company, but people around me keep saying it's not possible for someone like me. After what you did, I believe it is." Amara smiled warmly, resting a hand on the young woman's shoulder. "Don't let anyone decide where you belong," she said. "Build your seat at the table, and if they try to take it from you, build your own table." The girl nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. That night, Amara sat by the window of her hotel, overlooking the lights of the city. The world was still buzzing with her name, but she wasn't thinking about fame or headlines. She was thinking about the girl's words, about all the people she would never meet who now felt braver because of her stand. She realized something. The 5 billion wasn't the real victory. The real victory was the message she had sent, that no amount of humiliation could silence a person who knew their worth. That dignity was worth more than profit. That respect was not negotiable. And as the stars glimmered over the skyline, Amara whispered to herself, not in anger, but in peace. They tried to ground me. Instead, I showed them how high I could fly.